friends, what's up and welcome back to my channel. As you can tell from the title of today's video, I got inspiration from the general beauty videos that I've been watching recently. Outside of Booktube, I do watch a lot of like beauty content, video game content, that kind of thing. And I'm seeing an increasing trend of the beauty gurus doing videos that are like, my makeup collection if I wasn't a beauty guru, like blah blah blah. I wanted to sit down and film one of these a la if I wasn't a booktuber, if I wasn't a book reviewer, if I wasn't somebody who wanted to have a collection of books that I could recommend to people. Now, this is going to be a little bit weird because if you missed the video, I'll list it here. I got rid of half my books. I unhauled half of them, like literally half. So the books I'm going to show you today, I narrowed them down to 10. I think I have one series in here. We'll call that my eyeshadow palette that I can't live without. I narrowed it down to 10 though, because I really only kept books that I like, that I would read again. Now, these books that I'm about to show you, you can assume that you can pry them out of my cold dead hand. I'm not going to say that for every single book, but these books I would fight somebody over. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Let me know down below. We'll say 5 because this is really hard for me to do. We'll say 5 books that you absolutely could not live without, like physically owning. What 5 books would those be? If you are somebody who just goes to the library, what 5 books would you love to own if you could? So, first one I'm going to start out with is a very gay, very light, very adorable manga. And you guys have heard me talk about it on my channel. And the reason why I love it so much is, like I said, it's very light. There is a lot of manga that I have read or seen when it comes to male-male romances that is very kind of cringy in a way. But for me, it's not necessarily something that I'm 100% into. I do tend to like my romances, especially when my romances in manga, to be more light and fluffy. And for that, I have the perfect choice. And that would be I Hear the Sunspot. You guys have heard me rave. This follows the main character, Kohei. I have to look at their names because I'm gonna fuck them up. I'm terrible with Japanese. We have Kohei, who is deaf, and he meets a boy named Taichi, who is very like, let me just fucking say, he is the biggest goob I've ever read about in a story. He's very oblivious to a lot of stuff. He's very cheerful and happy and hungry. He's hungry throughout the entire novel. That's actually one of the things that really draws them together, is Kohei actually feeds him a lot. But he becomes he like transcribes notes for Kohei. Kohei. And they kind of end up having this budding romance, but it is so drawn out and so painstaking and beautiful and fluffy, and fuck, I love these guys. They are my favorite. Kohei, I believe, is completely out, or at least to the point where, like, if you asked him, he wouldn't be like, nah, I'm straight. And then Taichi is not. He doesn't necessarily consider it, like, he doesn't think about it, but when they do meet, he starts to kind of ponder it. So like I said, very drawn out, like the discovery of how he feels, and then it's like, how do they feel, and then it's like being open about it, and like their first kiss. Oh my god, I'm still swooning. I fucking love this series. I don't know if there's another one. I think there might be another one that's coming out. There's like the original series, and then there's kind of like a spin-off called The Theory of Happiness. So there is a bit going on with this. Very extensive story, and like I said, there is a bit of deaf rep in here. I am not of the deaf community. I don't have anybody in my life that is, so I can't speak to how well it is done. But I do really appreciate it because from my perspective, I did really enjoy it. But like I said, not of the community. So if you've read these, let me know if you feel like it does have good rep. But it's just like, this cover right here is exactly how the series is. Like, I fucking love it. So, like, I could be here for an hour, but you should read these if you haven't and you're really into manga and you're looking for a light and fluffy male-male romance. The next one I have to talk about is Sockhill Girls by Legrand. We kind of match. I actually like, this is my aesthetic now. You guys know I've raved about this. The reason why I rave about this follows 3 characters, and they are brought together in very circumstances, brought together in very weird ways. They live on an island called Sockhill. Our main character, Marion, I always want to call her Mary. Our main character, Marion, moves there to be with her father, who is a, like, deputy police officer in their town, and shit goes awry because girls start missing, and there's a monster that supposedly lives on Sockhill Island that steals girls, which plays very, very heavily into the story. The story is very spoop. People hate when you say spoop, but it's very spoop. It's not scary by any means, but Sockhill is very cut off from the rest of the world. It's very atmospheric. You guys know a bitch lives for that. This is my aesthetic. Like this, I want to live here. Just not with the people being murdered. But anyway, the reason why, despite that, not like that's bad things, but the reason why I love this book is the message, the story. I have recommended this. I would say this is more teen than really YA, but it's important. I would have killed for this book when I was younger because it teaches a lot about setting boundaries, being open with your friends, there being forgiving and where you draw the line when people wound you. There's a character in this book that really fucks up, like fucks up hard, and the rest of the characters are left to kind of be like, okay, well, where's the line of forgiveness? Because that character is essentially at one point in time forced to help, and the people that she's wounded are forced to help her in a way that benefits her. And it's so good, and it has like a little bit of feminism in there, but not like you'd expect, not very heavy-handed feminism, nothing like that at all. Just a beautiful story, one of my absolute favorites. If you haven't read it, you need to read it. Why are you sleeping on it? It's a polarizing book though. People either really love it or they really hate it, but I am so glad that I ended up really loving it. Ta-da! A book no one is surprised to see. Wolf and the Whale by Jordana Max Brodsky. You guys know I love this book. This book will fuck you up though. This is about Amat. Amat is very gender fluid in the way that they choose to live. They are spoken about as male and female in the book, so I'm just going to call them they. Amat is a young person in their tribe, and they are under their grandfather, basically the next person to inherit his job. But the problem is Amat, while identifying as male, is identified as female by their tribe, and when they start their period, they lose the privileges that they were kind of expecting. Now shit breaks loose when another tribe actually comes to Amat's tribe, and they sort of force their Western ideals on Amat's tribes. And I don't know, it's hard, and that's where the gender stuff comes in, because when this is happening, they're talking about how they are female, they are a woman and don't want to be, and then, you know, they identify as male at the same time. So it's very confusing, and it's definitely something that I don't think is very like set in stone. I don't know exactly how they identify. So there's a lot of, I mean, you could call them he, you could call them she. It's very confusing. But moral of the story, this book is so heartbreaking. Like I said, there is trigger warnings for rape, there's trigger warnings for murder of animals, and I don't necessarily mean in just like the hunting kind of form. The reason why I really like this book outside of all of those things is because there is, like I said, a sense of Amat's people, and then there are Vikings and the sense of their gods and their beliefs and their story, and there's a great love story that's told in this book, and it was beautiful, and when all the gods meet, it's just so good. And like I said, you guys have heard me rave about it. I have a full review on this book. I will link it up in the cards for you. But this is a book that I will forever cherish. And it has a very, like I said, harsh feel. It's a very harsh climate that the story takes place in. A lot of really terrible things happen throughout it. But I think it's a beautiful, gut-wrenching, like, I just love this book so much. And I really want to actually kind of reread it because, like I said, the gender fluidity of Amat as a character, I'm really interested in kind of dissecting that and sort of figuring out where they fall. So I really, really like this. And I think Jordana is not any of these races. She's just a white woman. And I think that she still did this really, really good. And it really reminds me of home. If you haven't read The Wolf and the Whale and you're from like Alaska like I am, I think if you are missing home, you should read this book because it like 100% just screams Alaska. There are 2 cats in my room right now. If they are assholes, I am sorry. The next book I have to talk about is one that I'm really excited to talk about, but one that none of you will be surprised to hear. Neanderthals, Sorcery of the Universe by Preston Norton. I have been telling you to read this book for forever. Basically, follows our main character, Cliff, and he is pondering what the fuck is the point of life because his brother has committed suicide. And that leaves a lot open for Cliff because he's also bullied at school because he's a big fucking dude. And there's a kid named Aaron who is a little shit in the beginning of the book, him and 2 of his friends, and they bully Cliff to no end. And it's kind of cool because, that's not cool. It's kind of cool because Cliff kind of turns that back out and is like very self-deprecating, which you guys know is my favorite kind of character. I love self-deprecating humor. But what happens is Aaron's dumbass gets into a boating accident, and Aaron's dumbass gets in a coma, and then randomly Aaron's dumbass comes back to school and is like, hey, I have a mission from God. We're supposed to fix our high school. Now, right about then, I'm sure you're noping out of this book. Let me tell you, there is no like Christian crazy connotation with this book. This book is nothing but fun. Preston is an amazing human being as well. I have another one of their books. I really, really, really want to get to. I'm just waiting for like the perfect mindset to read it. But this book is beautiful. Not only is it funny, not only is it self-deprecating, not only does Cliff get his in the end, it's so good. There is a great story about friendship and finding meaning in life by helping others and doing it while being the best version of you, the funniest version of you, the most self-deprecating, hilarious version of you. I fucking love this book. If you haven't read it, I'm telling you, I know it sounds dumb. I know it's like high school, teen YA setting or whatever, but it's not what you're expecting. It is beautiful. Like the title, you know when you read a book and you read the title in the book and you're like, oh my God, like I finally put it together. When it happens in this book, you're just like, boop, like mind blown. I fucking love this book. And if you've been sitting on it and you haven't read it, I've been yelling at you for like 2 years to read it, it's probably time. I really think that none of these books will be a shocker, but this book that I have here is my most prized possession, and I will straight up fight somebody if they try to take it from me. 10,000 Doors of January. This book is phenomenal. Follows our main character, January. Her and her father live on a mansion with this older white dude, and it's a few things are never really addressed in the book, but if you kind of pay enough attention, you can sort of understand. This is very early America, I do believe. And January and her father are Native American. January's father is a relic hunter, basically, for the man who owns this big plot of land with this giant mansion that January is forced to live on while her father is gone. They never really talk about her mother at the beginning of the book. All of that kind of comes together later. And one day January finds a book, and in the book she is when she starts flipping through the pages, she can kind of like sense the places and she can smell them and feel them and sort of starts traveling in a way. Now, I will say I don't necessarily know what genre this falls into. I wouldn't say it's fantasy. There's a lot of debate about what is really considered magical realism, and so I don't really know where it falls. I just know it falls on the fuck yeah spectrum of books that I absolutely love. This book is phenomenal. It tells a great love story across centuries and centuries and centuries. It is perfect. The overall atmosphere of the book, there is also a secret society that is there basically just to wreak havoc, and you don't know who's in it and kind of what's happening. But for me, it just like every page was like more and more and more. There's a dog in this book as well that I absolutely love. His name is Bad. I am inspired to name a dog after him because he's my favorite character from this book. But if you haven't read it, you need to read it. Like I said, I've been shoving this book down everybody's throats, and I don't do that lightly. Like, I do it because it's a great book, and if you haven't read it, you should, because January's story is one worth reading, and I think that it's very beautiful, and I feel like this would appeal to a lot of people. Also, another thing about this book, and another thing about Alex is 100% a reader, and so it's cool when you first dive into the book, when you first start reading things, you get a sense of very much so that she reads. Like, oh my God, I don't want to like spoil the book. There's like certain parts that I want to read to you, but I'm not going to read to you. But you can tell she writes in a way that she knows she would want to read, which I think is really cool. So I'm going to leave that here. I'm not going to ramble, but once again, this is another book that you need to read if you haven't read on my recommendation. And I think you can probably get it at the library now. Here is where we get into my bisexual wizard husband in Sorcery of Thorns. Yes, I'm trash for this. I'm actually shocked that I was trash for this because I then went back and read an Enchantment of Ravens and fucking hated it. But this book shows growth in the author and her writing, and I love it. People either like an Enchantment of Ravens or they like Sorcery of Thorns. I have yet to meet somebody that liked both. If you were one of those people, tell me why down below. This book follows my character Elizabeth, and she works in a library. It's like a grand library, great library, I can't remember. But basically there are people called wardens, who is what she's training to be. She is found in the library as a young girl, but she ends up staying. They end up allowing her to stay, to grow up there, and she wants to become a warden like the other wardens that she was left in the care of. And what they do is they protect the world from grimoires, which are these books that basically turn into fucking monsters. Y'all, when I tell you that I read that and was like, this book is perfect. Like, I'm just like sitting there imagining like all the shit on my shelves just like coming to life and like what would they be. I read this book in 4 hours, 5 hours, something like that, and hailed it. She is accused of letting the most powerful grimoire out, and cue my bisexual wizard husband. This is when Nathaniel comes in. Nathaniel is he's kind of like a man of the law. He is pretty active in politics, and he is the person who is sent to pick her up, to basically for her to face a trial. And there's a lot more to the story because there's like a secret society. There are things I didn't like about this book, like the overall bad guy I didn't think was like the biggest bad guy ever. And like the pacing was a little bit off. And I'm all the biggest disappointment is that this is a standalone. Why you do this? I'm hoping, given the ending, if you've read this, you'll know that there will be an alternate story told from a different character's perspective. My other favorite character in this book, I can't really talk about why they're my favorite, but if you've read it, you probably know who I'm talking about. They're a cat. This book is just phenomenal. Once again, it's another one of those books that as a reader, you know the author's also a reader, and they really wanted to write that richness into the story. They wanted to write something that they would want to read, and I love that. I think that's like my new favorite thing. It's very funny, it's very sassy, very like, I don't know, badass. I fucking love this book, and if you haven't read it, I would read it, especially if you are into like sorcery and grimoires and kind of like dark magic and things like that. I think you'd really like it. The next book I'm going to talk about are actually a series, and this is my eyeshadow palette book that I wanted to talk about. It'd be the Dark Tower series. Now, caveat here, first book is garbage, last book is garbage. And when I say last book, I mean that stupid fucking add-on, The Wind Through the Keyhole that he did. Don't read them. Neither of them matter, truly. The first one doesn't really add to the story. It's a lot of garbled mess, and even Steven said it's the worst book he's ever written, so don't at me. Although I think him and I disagree on what the worst book he's ever written is. This series is phenomenal. If you are a fan of King and you have read a lot of his stuff, or even if you haven't, and you've been looking at the series like, wow, I really want to do this, but a bitch is thick, you're gonna love it. It has so many callbacks to things that he has written in other books, which is my favorite thing that Steven does. Although I will say, to an extent, it is kind of lazy world building, but it does kind of build his own kind of world. A lot of times in his books, he can just reference another book and you kind of get the sense of the world as opposed to him like building a new one. But it is kind of cool to see those kinds of things woven into all of the stories. Any book that was written before this or while he was writing it, you get little nods to that, and then once the series was finished, in his newer books, you get nods to the Dark Tower series. So if you've read him for a long time, you kind of know. But this book follows our main character, Roland, and he is chasing the man in black across the desert. Literally, whole fucking point of the book right there. He is trying to kill the man in black, and along the way, he picks up a lot of strays. My favorite character, hands down, is Susanna. She is dynamic, although I will say, with how I feel about Steven recently and some of the ways that he's written characters, I'd be interested to see what I would think of her and her character going back now and rereading it. But the story is very, very creepy. If you've been following me for a long time, you'll know that I have two kinds of Steven books that I love. Very quintessential Stephen King for me would be the very gory, spooky kind of horror that he does, the very like hard-hitting horror, or the very mundane kind of everyday drama characters that he writes, because I would not say Steven writes great characters by any means, but he does kind of write them in a mundane way that makes it easy to relate to them. You get all of that in here. You get all of that because the series is so fucking long that you get like every kind of king you could ever want. He actually even writes himself into the book at one point, which I thought was actually pretty cool. I love it. If you are one of those people that has seen the movie and you were like, this is fucking stupid, I'm just gonna let you know that that movie, it was trash, was, although Idris Elba, it was the entire series in one book. They cut out so much. They cut out all the cool villains. They cut out all of the nods to his other books. It was bad. So if you've watched the movie and you don't want to read it because of that, please, please, please do yourself a favor. Skip the first one. Read the rest of the series. It is phenomenal. I don't know how many books I'm at. I think this is 8. I don't know. I hope I planned this right. Anyway, next book I have here is Kings of the Wyld. You guys know this is another book that I've been shoving down people's throats for a very specific reason, but also if you've been wanting to read this but haven't quite had the push, they're turning it into a show, and I know how you guys are, all high and mighty about reading the book before you see the show. So you plan on seeing the show at all, or you know people in the book community are going to be all about it, and then you're gonna wanna watch the show and you're just gonna have to read it. You might as well just read it right now. This book follows our main character, Clay Cooper, who is daddy. I love Clay, but he is in what is called a band. And a band in this world are a group of mercenaries, basically. They can be hired to do things. They do a lot of like stage stuff as well. It's very like 80s band vibes. That's kind of what you get through this book. But so when they're very much younger, when they're very young, they're younger men, they are out doing the mercenary thing, and eventually they all decide to start settling down. So at the beginning of this book, Golden Gabe, who used to be the leader of their group, comes to Clay and says, hey, my daughter's missing. I need you to get the band back together. And Clay's like, dog, I'm so old. Like, I have a wife and a daughter. Like, I hung that shit up long ago. I don't want to do it. And Golden Gabe's like, it's my daughter, though. And he was like, okay, fine, we'll do it. So the rest of the book is basically them getting the band back together. A lot of nods to like 80s music, D&D campaign-esque kind of stuff. The only thing I don't like about this book is it's very like, it keeps all of your faves kind of safe. So when you think something bad happens, there's always something that kind of like undoes that. Now the second one is a good follow-up to that. I think it's a little bit more brutal in that way, although I will say the second one is a bit weaker than this one. Not my favorite, but I am hoping the third one just brings it all together in a perfect chef's kiss. We'll see. This book is phenomenal. Favorite character is Moog. He is a very, very gay, very, very old wizard. He is the best. He is basically, oh god, he's basically the comedic relief of the book in a way, although I will say every character is very funny. This book almost made me piss myself laughing. Like, I fucking needed it, and I didn't know I needed it, and this book has set the standard for the type of fantasy books that I like to read because it was a perfect blend of, like, humor and, like, so Moog's very like absent-minded and very like just fucking way out in left field. And so some of the stuff he does, you're just baffled by it. I think everybody else is also baffled by it. But my favorite thing about this book and about the characters is Clay. Clay has the worst luck, and every time something bad happens to him, I just picture this very bumbling like idiot the whole time. But he is my other favorite character. I fucking love him. I love all of the characters in this. There's another character named Larkspur in this book who is badass, and she has a really great like arc as well. Very good character development, I would say. And I've been rambling about this one for like 3 minutes, so I'm gonna get off of here. But this is another one, like I said, if you haven't read, you need to. Also, they're coming out with a show, so you might as well read it now. The next book I have here is a romance novel, and I really, really wanted to talk about it. So this is Well Met by Jen DeLuca. This follows my character Emily, and she falls in love with, or has a romantic relationship with, Simon. And basically, what this follows is Emily goes back to her hometown basically to take care of her sister and her sister's daughter because her sister is in a car accident and unable really to continue life as normal. So Emily's like, all right, yeah, I'll come and stay. And when she goes there, her niece wants to be a part of the Renaissance Festival, but to be able to do it, they need to have an adult that actually participates. So cue Emily deciding to become a bar wench at Renaissance, which by the way is like a dream job of mine. That would be so much fun. And then she meets Simon, the man who runs the Renaissance Festival, who is a giant prick outside of the Renaissance Festival itself. There's a reason for it. It's very well done in this book. I'm not going to spoil it, but it's kind of confusing for Emily because Simon is a pirate during Renaissance, and he's very flirty and very like all up in her stuff during Renaissance, but outside of it, he's just a cold asshole. She doesn't really understand why. So it's got a lot of like role-playing, LARPing kind of aspects to it. I've recommended this to a lot of my LARP friends who've loved it. It is so good. It gives me that very autumn vibe. Like, this is a book that I would need to have every single autumn. Like, absolutely, without a doubt, would need to have. It's a cute romance. The like sex is pretty good. Not my favorite, but the overall story is just so much better than that. And Emily also works at like a small bookstore, and it's just very small town autumn. I love it. You have to read it if you haven't read it and you're into romance. Although at this point, I don't know who hasn't read it, but very, very good. And the last book I have to talk about, I'm saving the best for last. My favorite series of all time. Can't wait for the third one, although Alex is a monster and is probably going to kill people I care about. Big Ship at the Edge of the Universe. You guys know, I've talked about this series a lot on my channel. No one here is surprised, but this book, when I first read it, was horrifying to me on many levels, which made it a great book. Basically, main character Nyla, one of the main characters, is in what I would consider like a futuristic kind of sci-fi NASCAR, and in the middle of the race everything is paused so she can kind of see what's happening but she can't do anything, and the villain of this book named Mother shows up and kills the man in front of her, and that is when she finds out there is a secret society that is basically starting to try to create World War II for their universe. Cue Boots, who I always want to call Bunny because I have a friend named Bunny, and I feel like Boots always reminds me of her, and I feel like I'm Nyla because I didn't want to out myself like this, but Nyla is like a pig-headed baby, and that is me to a T, and Boots is a very sassy older lady who gets roped into this story because she is part of the military, So when the secret society is found out, her old group gets roped into basically attempting to stop World War II. Now, I wouldn't say the government necessarily knows what's going on or is even really understanding that that's what they're doing, but why I love this story is how they all come together and the character growth. I will say one of my favorite characters is no longer in this book. I'm not going to say who it was, but just reading the third one, I know is going to be really, really hard because they're not going to be there and there's going to be this like very big emptiness. However, this series is very much so my favorite because of found family. You guys know I am a hoe for found family. The characters in this, Boots is older and has been betrayed a lot by people that she considered close to her. She doesn't have family or anybody left, and Nyla is basically a trophy for the company that she works for, so she also gets treated like shit. So a lot of this book is them kind of coming together as a group, because when they all first meet, they all fucking hate each other, and that's what makes this so good, because the character development, the overall plot, like the secret society, big universe kind of feel to it, can run so deep and get so intricate, and Alex definitely did an amazing job. They are a phenomenal author. If you guys are really into characters, this is a series for you. If you're looking for an adult sci-fi novel, this is for you. If you're looking for a terrifying villain, Mother is your bitch. This book is so good. Like I said, you guys have heard me rave about it before, so I won't stay here for too long. Third one is coming out. I'm not being paid or asked or anything. Alex doesn't know I'm gonna do this, but I'm gonna leave a pre-order link for it because it would mean a lot to me if you guys had any interest in reading this, if you would pre-order the third one so we can get Alex up there. But yeah, that's all I'm gonna say about this book. This book completed my life in a way that I didn't even know. Alright friends, so those are, I hope, the 10 books that I would fight somebody on. They are the 10 books that if I got rid of every single book that I owned, that I would need to either repurchase or keep, or the only books that I would have throughout my reading, if I thought about books that really, really hit me that I would want to pass on to a friend or definitely reread more than once kind of thing, those are the books that I would keep. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Like I said, let me know down below up to 5 books that you would keep for one reason or another if all of your other books were gone. But I love you so much. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in my next video.